And that is why this issue is so important. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a revolution brewing in Texas. The Supreme Court, in a ruling that is a disgrace to our nation and the founding of this country, decided that Texas is no longer able to defend itself. Now governors across the nation are beginning to back Texas and saying, hold up, if you can do this to Texas, well, what rights do we have? It's been pretty special to see as Texas begins to act like Texas again. And as Republican governors begin to coalesce around, wait a second, states' rights actually do matter. This is a conversation we've been waiting to have for quite a while. Check it out.
Several high-profile Republican governors, including Ron DeSantis of Florida, now rushing to Abbott's defense, arguing states like theirs also have a right to protect themselves. And their support comes only a few days after the Supreme Court sided with the Biden administration, ruling some of the border razor wire put up by Texas must come down. Now, as you guys also mentioned, there's a small number of Texas Democrats calling on President Biden to federalize the Texas National Guard. The White House has not indicated it's looking to do such a thing, even though it's pushing for a legislative solution with Congress.
Greg Abbott responded in the harshest possible terms to this. And by the way, when Democrats say they want to secure the border, a reminder, Democrats battled Texas all the way to the Supreme Court in order to remove the barriers that they put up to defend their state. And they wish to strike a border agreement with Republicans? After doing that? No. And the Texas governor, Greg Abbott, is calling out this bullshit for what it is and are saying we're not going to suffer it. Not here, not now. This is Texas. God bless Texas. Watch.
It was the states that created the United States, and when the states voted to create the United States and have a constitution, included in that agreement was the compact that the federal government would take care of the states. And Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution speaks to that and says that if the federal government does not take care of the states, and the states are in danger, well, we can ask the federal government to live up to its obligation. Then the authors of the Constitution knew there would be times when the federal government would not live up to its duty. And so they empowered states in Article 1, Section 10, the right of self-defense. And what Texas is asserting is our Article 1, Section 10 right of self-defense, because the President of the United States is not fulfilling his duty to enforce the laws passed by Congress that deny illegal entry into the United States.
It's blatantly unconstitutional. It should wither under an actual just court. The states of Montana, Florida, South Dakota, Virginia, Oklahoma, Georgia, Utah, West Virginia have all backed Texas in this. These are dangerous times. And ladies and gentlemen, now we are going to be joined by the chief law enforcement official of the state of Texas to talk about these dangerous times and what Texas is going to do about it. Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, joins the show now.
If you're turning 65 or beyond, you're going to want to watch this. There are a lot of people today that are Medicare.
Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, joins the show now. Mr. Attorney General, thank you so much for being on the program. Appreciate you sticking with us through what I heard was a couple of technical difficulties, but nothing as difficult as the federal government coming in to cut your border, your razor wire at your border. First off, your take on this, our take is there's no way that the founders of the Constitution would have ever intended the federal government to be able to force an invasion on a state. That seems utterly antithetical to the actual founding of our nation, which was to have 13 different states that protected themselves, right? Am I correct in that?
I mean, I'm the one that filed this lawsuit. It started happening. When I got impeached, I couldn't do anything. I saw it happening while I was out. The day I came back, I brought this to my staff and said, we have to stop this. There's no way that the federal government has the authority to damage our property, to stop us from defending the border. So just because we have a 5-4 ruling by the Supreme Court doesn't mean they're right, and it doesn't mean we're going to help them damage our own property and allow them to easily come cut our fences down. It's still wrong, and we're actually still in this case. It's not over. Obviously, it's a bad sign when they get rid of the injunction, but we're actually still in this case on the merits at the trial level.
So what is the path moving forward? I've seen some very strong statements out of the Texas state legislature and the governor, whose administration you serve. What is the path forward here? More razor wire, I'm seeing.
Absolutely. More razor wire. We're going to start deporting people, I think, in March when that goes effective. We have legislation passed, and it goes into effect, I think, in March. And once they start deporting people, I'm sure the Biden administration will love that. We are also still protecting Shelby Parks. We're not letting the Border Patrol in there to process people. They can come in if they need to do some emergency process, but we're not letting them in there just to let more people in. So you're right. It cannot be true that just because the federal government not just ignores their federal laws, but actually aids and abets the cartels in getting people here. Because remember, these people are coming to our country. They're being brought by the cartels. They're not hiding anymore. They're not trying to run from Border Patrol. I don't think people realize it. They're actually just being brought to us. And the Biden administration is helping get as many people here for the very reason that you talked about with the election as possible in as fast a period of time before Biden is out of office.
So can you please explain to me, who is certainly not a legal scholar nor a lawyer, how the Supreme Court could rule on this? Along, John Roberts, of course, to his great shame, but as predicted, and Amy Coney Barrett was a surprise to many people. How they could possibly rule that the Constitution, which was written by a bunch of people that had just rejected and repulsed the British invasion of their homes, would allow for the foreign invasion of a state. How do you square that?
So they didn't actually give us an explanation. They just got rid of the injunction. So we don't actually have an opinion letting us know why they said this. Now, we can go back to Roberts, 10, 12 years ago when the U.S. v. Arizona case came down. He sided with the liberal judges back then. And unfortunately now, I was hoping with the new justices that they would all stick together against Roberts on this issue, or maybe Roberts could see the error of his ways over the last 10, 15 years in allowing that case to go forward. He's seen the consequences of not just Texas, but really the entire country. And yet, here he is again, blocking the states from protecting their very own citizens from all types of crimes and all potential of even terrorists coming across the border.
Does this mean no more sanctuary cities? I mean, right? So does this ruling mean that the federal government can just seize control of sanctuary cities and that they have supremacy here when it comes to immigration policy? So the next Republican administration just marches directly into sanctuary cities and say this isn't a real thing?
Yeah, it seems like that, doesn't it? It seems like if that's true, if it's true on one side, it certainly seems like the feds can do it on the other side, which is say we're not going to honor sanctuary cities. You can't do that anymore. We're going to move these people out of here. So you would think that, but none of this makes any sense. This is not the Constitution. This is a bunch of liberal judges ignoring the fact that we have a right as a state to protect ourselves. And you're right. It goes back to the founding of our country. And there's no way that the founders would say, oh yeah, if the federal government's not going to protect you, you have to let all the consequences and potentially, people dying, you have to let all those consequences happen. States, no, you have no right to fight back.
I mean, Madison actually talks about this in Federalist Papers. There are multiple articles in the Federalist Papers about the potential of a foreign invasion and how the states are the first line of defense. And so now, given this ruling, I guess you'd have to reverse engineer that, but then state that if a Republican became president and the federal government has supremacy here, then a Republican could build a wall like Fort Knox on the border, and Democrats couldn't do anything about it. I mean, right? Can't you reverse engineer this into Texas? Like the federal government can assist in Texas, like in a next Trump administration could assist in Texas in building like a militarized wall on the border, including crocodiles and a moat.
I would think exactly if the Supreme Court's right, and obviously you'd have to have some congressional approval because actually none of this is congressional approval. So you're right. I think you're right. I think that if the Supreme Court's rationale is correct, any president can do anything about immigration he wants, and it's fine, according to the Supreme Court.
I love reverse engineering this because like people, boom, clap, squee online, libs do, and then they don't understand like what happens when Trump wins a 350 electoral vote landslide in November, and then comes in and says, "Oh, well, lucky me. The Supreme Court's decided I can build anything I want on the border because I have supremacy here."
Exactly.
And so
I actually started thinking about this from the standpoint of, Congress has got to prove it. But under their theory, it's whatever Joe Biden wants to do or doesn't want to do, and then we have no ability to stop it. So if that's true, then presumably Trump can do whatever he wants to do, whether the states like it or not, or the federal government's authorized it, he can do it.
Okay, so we're going to go full Game of Thrones, like the Great White Wall. Like, fantastic. Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Again, I'm not arguing this is a good thing. Obviously, this is clearly a very bad thing. And now you've had all like the Republican Avengers have come to your side. It's actually quite neat to see an enormous phalanx of Republican governors have been standing up for Texas. What aid are they offering you?
So far, I mean, it's just words, but I do think that that's encouraging because hopefully this actually wakes the Supreme Court up. It wakes Congress up to actually act or maybe change. Because look, there's up until now, the Supreme Court's never had any pushback from Republican governors other than a few, like Abbott or maybe Ducey when he was there, and occasionally DeSantis. Now, if you have Republican governors allying together to speak out, I think we've got a much better chance of the Supreme Court maybe paying attention and maybe switching one of those votes. I'm not sure. Maybe Roberts is a lost cause, but maybe Amy Coney Barrett is not.
Mm-hmm. So this statement by Governor Greg Abbott, which I'm sure you had a hand in helping craft, that you have also promoted on your X account, Mr. Attorney General, you say that you stand ready to bring any legal means necessary to defend Texas. We push back against the out-of-control federal government. So what does that mean? Because now people inside of the Texas delegations are saying, how about Joe Biden should just wartime federalize the Texas National Guard, should just send American troops to conquer Texas, right? Like, is that where we're heading?
If it is, it's pretty scary. I mean, I can't imagine that occurring. But look, we're in uncharted territory, given the invasion that we have and the federal government aiding and abetting the invasion. And so we're fighting our own government. States, we need to realize this. We are fighting. We may not be doing it with guns. God help us if we end up there, but that is not the situation we should be in. The federal government should be helping us prevent the very bad consequences of allowing criminals and terrorists into our country. And it's hard to believe, but that's where we're at.
So the razor wire shall continue until morale approves. The deportations in the new Immigration Act that was just passed and signed into law, those will begin this spring. Do you believe that the federal government will step in to stop you from doing that? Joe Biden has threatened to.
Oh, I think they'll definitely try it. I mean, they've been emboldened by the Supreme Court. Well, I say the Supreme Court, 5 members of the Supreme Court. So I have no doubt that they're confident that Roberts and maybe Amy Coney Barrett will side with them. I don't know. Hopefully they'll wake up and realize the massive consequences to that. But we're not going to stop trying. We have to fight because we have an obligation to help protect our citizens if the Biden administration is going to do just the opposite.
So Article 1 of the Constitution allows for the states' rights to self-defense. Has that just been destroyed here? What's your legal reading on this, Mr. Attorney General?
No, I don't think you can ever destroy the Constitution. I mean, whatever they say it means, the words are pretty clear. So I think we have a right and an obligation to defend our borders when the federal government fails to do that. And it was contemplated, as you said, by James Madison. It was the governor spoke of that himself, that there were times that the founders were worried that the federal government wouldn't step in, and individual states have the right and the moral obligation to protect their citizens. And we're going to do it somehow, some way. We're going to do it.
Well, Godspeed in all of that. I have one final, I guess, potential scenario to discuss with you that I think might put this into clearer context. Regularly, I try as hard as I can to explain this to liberals, like what they are doing to themselves. Regularly, Vladimir Putin talks about the purchase of Alaska. And Alaska is closer to Russia than it is to mainland America, and talks about what a mistake that was and how he wants to take that back, how he wants to dissolve that treaty and essentially take back Alaska. And so under this ruling, Alaska wouldn't be able to defend itself from like a Russian invasion. Like, correct? Like the federal government could and may decide that Alaska just simply has to go back to the Russians.
Yeah, and not just Joe Biden decides that. I think they were right. You know, they made a mistake in the 1800s, and yeah, just we're not going to stop it. Let Russia have it. And under this theory, Alaska would be just stuck. They wouldn't supposedly be allowed to do anything. We know that they would do everything they could to stop that from happening. But that is the theory. They would have no right, as long as the federal government, because they are preempted from protecting themselves, they can't protect themselves.
Such a poisonous political theory. Other than prayers, how can our audience help you, Mr. Attorney General?
Look, just stay engaged. I mean, keep talking about it. I'm grateful that you are, and encourage your political leaders to get involved. If you're in other states, which we have people out listening from all these states, encourage your governor, encourage your attorney general to speak out about what's going on, because the more they hear from us in Washington, the more likely we are to get what we need.
Yes, that is exactly right. There's true power in the people. It still is that way, thank God. That is what Democrats are actually trying to solve. That's the X in the equation that they are trying to solve with 30 million criminal illegal aliens in this country, is that to dilute your power as a citizen. Don't let them do it. God bless you for fighting, and God bless Texas.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Godspeed.